comments or questions about the work can be further expressed.
Hello, everyone. Hello. What a beautiful occasion to be able to come together. This is a lot of work to take on, to create. First of all, I'm proud of you, Robin. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Aitina Fareed-Cooke, and I live and breathe creativity. That's just what my life is about. I'm a proud creative. And when I met Robin, she just blew my mind with the creativity that was within her and her insight. But she was so shy. She was like, not necessarily shy, but just I want to say introverted, but I'm introverted too. You know what I mean? But I knew it was something in her. When you see her thinking or creating, it was something in her that I just was like, yo, when she gets there, she's going to get there. And she went there fast. And as you can see, she really put a lot of work and energy into her pieces, her writing structure, everything about it. And I'll talk more later about specific pieces. But I'm just really proud of every step that you made towards what you authentically wanted for yourself. And a lot of times people don't know how to do that, and they're afraid to take the risk on themselves, and you did that. Like you're a young lady, and you said, you know what, this is what I want to do, and you pursued it, and I'm proud of that. And keep doing that. Keep reaching and taking risk with yourself, taking risk with your art, and taking risk within culture. And don't ever be afraid to showcase you as the authentic artist that you are. Thank you.
Edreys Wajed. I'm an artist through and through, lifetime artist. And my connection with Robin is somewhat familial. My sister is very good friends with Mike Quinniey. And so the Quinnies, I've always heard the Quinniey name for as long as I can remember. The Quinnies. And the Quinnies are somehow, you guys are very reputable. I'll put it that way. Large contributor to community. And what I've known about the Quinniey family too is that, as Aitina mentioned, you being kind of like reserved or shy, I think that's just how y'all move though. Y'all make a lot of stuff happen, but y'all just be moving moving in and out, and you don't make a big fuss about it. Y'all do your thing, and so that I think that you earn that just naturally, but I'm here tonight because, same as Aitina mentioned, like when you have a mentee, it's almost your duty when that mentee calls you and say, hey, can you be here? Can you lend this? Can you whatever comes after the can, you just say yeah, as far as I'm concerned when it comes to mentorship. So I see it as an honor for you to be where you are as far as in your journey right now, which is very early but still very powerful to watch. And that's what mentorship is about. So never be afraid to pick up the phone, hit me up, whatever. And same sentiments as Aitina. So I'm very proud of you, very, very proud of you. And I'm looking forward to getting into this artwork so you can talk to your people about your art, so they can see it on a different level. You good? All right. So let's just get into it.
Okay.
All right. So there are quite a few. I had the privilege, outside of Mom, to see some of these pictures early, right? So I guess that's an advantage to being a mentor. I gave a little sneak peek, and I had a talk with her, and it was just like, again, I hadn't seen her work in quite some time, and you bloomed, So I don't know what you dug into or what you found, what you discovered, but that's like my first question for you. Is this work, artists don't present work until they feel it's ready, right? As artists, we don't feel like if you don't feel it's ready, you're not going to necessarily present it. So being that it's presented, how did you know that it was ready? Like, how did you know that it was ready? describe us a little bit the build up from, you know, where you are, where you started in school with the craft and now where you are currently or what we see.
Okay, that's a loaded question, but I'll try my best. I guess to see, I think I've always sort of like had ideas, but not necessarily known how to execute them and how I wanted. I know going from like myself 4 years ago, I don't think would be like skillfully capable of using, like, so I use a lot of Photoshop. I was so scared of Photoshop 4 years ago. I like almost refused to use it for my images until my friend and my professor basically like forced me to do it. And I'm glad that they did, because I like loved like doing it so much, being able to just, because once you have like the skills to do something, as long as you have like an idea of how to execute an idea, you can kind of just trial and error until you get it right. So I would say part of like from where I was to where I am now, it's just trial and error. I think that practice doesn't necessarily make perfect, but it does build skill. So yeah, a lot of trial and error, a lot of just like seeing the world around me and seeing like my interpretation of that and how I want to communicate what I think about something to others. I think that's like a big source driver for the work I create and like how I create work and like the subject matter I choose to do.
Yeah, I have a question. So what I noticed as I started from the first image, or the first piece, Sacred Heart, all the way to this last one, what I noticed was that in almost every single description, you were talking about how you pulled from some other source.
Mm-hmm.
So like Sacred Heart, you pulled from, I can't remember how to pronounce the name of the artist. What's the name of it?
Yeah, it's like Pompello. Can't pronounce his last name.
It's a tough one.
It's very
But
Italian.
I noticed that you pulled from these different sources, which leads me to believe that you are someone who actually digs a little deeper than the surface when it comes to the craft. So I'd like to know, what is that digging process, or rather, what inspires you or encourages you to dig deeper into a source, if you will? Because you mentioned a couple different people, Michelangelo and some other names that I can't remember off the top of my head. But I love when artists dig into other artists to find themselves, to find their way of painting portraits with their work. So tell us a little bit about that process of digging into other artists.
Okay, so I think as an artist, we're interacting and contributing to history and how things will be seen and how they're presented. So it's kind of a responsibility to do your research on like the history of that thing and the other thing, and also so you can better interact with it, because I would hate to like misrepresent something even if I had like an idea based off of it. In terms of like all of my references, I've always had like a really deep passion for history and how it's not only how it's taught, because it's not necessarily always taught in the most accurate forms, but it's just something that's always like fascinated me, because like what happened in the past, even if it was like an obscure thing, that it like has impacted the today, and your interactions with that current thing today also affects the future. So that's something I always try to take into consideration and into deep thought when I'm going about things. Yeah.
Now, so as an educator, Aitina is also an educator too, so shout out to any educators here. Particularly for me, when she asked me, you know, to kind of be up here, to be a part of this, I kind of was like, I don't know. And the only reason I hesitate is because I'm not a photographer. You know, I'm steeped in the arts, but I'm not a photographer. I think there's a different understanding with the craft if you're a photographer seeing another photographer's work, because you can, like I said, you can talk the lingo and you know exactly, you know, what the exposure was. And I don't know all of that, but I do know how to appreciate and read art, which is what you have here. And so one of the things that I picked up off of was, as a big hip hop head, I'm a big hip hop head. And one of the things about that new culture, which is, you know, started by black people, just now only 50 years old, you know, the culture itself. What makes it so rich is the ability to observe something, extract from it, and then make something new. So when I was looking at these pieces, the same as you mentioned, like there's a Botticelli, you know, there's a reference to Venus, the old romanticism pieces. You have a lot of very old motifs, you know, 1400s, from the 1500s. That's a long time ago, you know. And so for you to be able to, that's what I plucked out. Was I was like, oh wow, like you're sampling to me. It looks like sampling, but you're taking it and flipping it with your own voice on it, right? So I don't know if that was inspired, that was a thing for you, but the long way around to my question was, one of the things I was always tell my art students, they would hate when they would draw something that didn't look like what they wanted it to be. So one of the things you mentioned was, you know, you were investigating, like, I wonder how I want to say something, right? So why the camera? Why photography? Why that as your tool? And after you answer the why, how confident are you with using that as your tool as well to speak? Because that's what you're doing. You're communicating something with it.
I think photography. Glad that wasn't my phone. Sorry. I think photography, like the camera captures like what is. In a sense, for the longest time, photography wasn't accepted as an art form because it was just like capturing the moment. So a lot of photography was just like photojournalism and things for newspapers. So in that sense, like we see something and we think, oh, that's a picture. It has to be real because it captures what we see. But I think like photography can also be manipulated in a sense in terms of like what we see in advertisements. I specialize in advertising photography at school, so like seeing this thing that is, but also that what we end up seeing in the end is technically what it isn't, because it's gone through like several different like processes to get that final like ready for the public image. So I like photography because it does capture what is, but it can also be changed slightly to subvert the conscious it subverts like the conscious like belief on like what is, and it can kind of elude and decept from like what it is to see, like to get like your point as an artist across.
It's persuasive.
Yes, it's very persuasive. So, and then like as confident in my ability to capture and then also persuade, I think that I'm still like growing in that area, because sometimes I know I get like wrapped up in how like I think of something and perceive about something, but it's also like with photography, at least like especially like in advertising sense, you have to like make it so it's also able to be perceived by others in a way that still gets your point across. So like everyone can communicate with like what you've created on like the subject matter that you've like chosen to do.
That's good insight. I like how you broke down the persuasiveness of photography. It's so true. It's like reality, but you can mold it a certain way to push people to think or question reality. I love photography too. And it's just an extension of your voice. And as you were talking, and as I'm thinking about it, I feel like you're not really introverted. It's just that your language is different, which I connect with. Like, my language is in the arts, and I feel like I can speak the most, or I feel the most comfortable within that space. Whereas, you know, being in big crowds, even though I do that a lot, I don't feel as open as I do when I capture, or when I'm, you know, in creation mode for music or what have you. One of the questions that I had for you was, how do you hold on to your authenticity as an artist? Because I remember when I first met you, I remember when you went through different programs that I, you know, had, you haven't really changed in the sense of who you are, you know. And a lot of times I see a lot of young people that I work with, they change, or they pull away from certain things that I know that they're really amazing at. And because of whatever the situation is, peer pressure or certain situations you come across, they begin to drift off from what, in my opinion, what is truly their craft. And then they live out their life, and then they realize in their 40s, oh, this is who I was all the time. But you've been able to consistently run towards whoever Robin is. Every time I see anything you do, whether you post, whether you're in my presence, you're always you. Talk about, like, what is the process of holding on to your authenticity?
I think when I'm not authentic to myself, it just feels disingenuous in like what I'm creating and how I'm interacting with the world in general. Also, like, I think there are times where I overthink everything. So there are times where I like get in my head and try to go like, oh, will this like be more likable to people or like palatable to people? And in the end it doesn't feel right, and I really don't like the feeling of it not feeling right, because in the end I go back to what I think I should do, and it just, I think, works better. So I just continuously, well, I'm always like open to like input and developing as a person and as an artist. I think when it comes to like staying true to like what I want to say and who I am, I just try to stick to that, because it's always like a gut feeling, and I try to kind of stick with that, because everything sort of happens. I like to think that everything sort of happens for a reason, or how you wouldn't have like thought of something if you didn't think it was a good idea. So even if like it starts off like rough around the edges, just continuing to like work with that until you can like smooth out all like the kinks and stuff, I think is like something I really try to do like consistently and keep up with.
Can I do a real quick follow-up to that? Because I'd like to know, I'm trying to push to something here, because I think it's important to showcase. How much does the influences of your peers or whatever circle you created for yourself, how much does that add to you holding true to your authenticity? Also family and individuals that you selected in your circle.
When it comes to peers, I'm fortunate enough where at the school I go to, and like in the specialization of my program, everyone has their own like voice and aesthetic, and though it's like competitive, we all want each other to do well, so we do offer advice for each other, but it's never in a way to like deter from what they're initially going from. And then also, one of my professors at school, Clay Patrick McBride, he's very punk rock. So in how he goes about like it's his philosophy of photography. So it's always, even if like this is the assignment, still do the assignment, but like keep it true to yourself, because you're not there to learn how to make work that looks like everyone else's work. You're there to develop your own visual voice, they call it, and continue that on and forward. In terms of like friends and friends I keep around me, I feel like when it comes to people you can choose to be around, I don't like being around people who feel the need to like change who I am or how I go about things, because then they're not really like there to know me or be like friends with myself. They're trying to like project an image onto me, and it's not really my job to fulfill someone else's like perception of me.
Say that again. You gotta play that back. That takes so many people so long to realize.
Yeah, because it's not your job to necessarily fulfill the perceptions of others. It's your job to continue to be the person you yourself want to be and relevant to. And it's all like being around people who don't like you. It's not fun, or people who want you to be different so that they feel better around you. It's not, or comfortable. It's like that's not my job or anyone's job to like commodify themselves so others feel like better about themselves and being around you. That's something they need to work on themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. To be so young and have that perspective. That's something that, a principle that will last, that will serve you well moving forward, not only as an artist, but as a human being as well. One of the things I always share with my sons is, I always say this, I'm not in the business of converting or convincing anybody of anything. That energy spent on converting and convincing somebody could be better used just being an example and demonstrating it. And that's what you're doing. So we're going to get into some of these pieces, I think. And I think some people have maybe some inquiries about some of these pieces in particular. I'm going to lead that off by saying you are in advertising, right? Advertising is about storytelling, pretty much, right? So each one of these pieces has a story with it, or it can convey a story. And earlier on, I was talking, we were kicking it, and we were like, is there a storyline between the beginning and the end? Like people are already trying to find connecting dots with these stories. So of the pieces that are up, which one do you think would you say for you? And I'm not saying to pick theory. I would never ask artists, what's your favorite? Because I don't like that question. But which of these pieces is executed the most to the highest degree of like, okay, I planned this, I tweaked it this way, and this is the story that I want to come from, and which one is the most impactful for you?
I would say I believe it's labeled Goliath Conquered. That one's my favorite, not my favorite, but I think the one it's visual. The reference is Donatello's David and Goliath statue. It's the figure of a black woman implied on top of like a dead implied KKK Klansman. That one was the one I think that really like not necessarily kicked off everything else, but the one the entire time was like, this is the one I know I have to do if I don't do the other ones, because it came to me like out of nowhere. I was looking for my keys too, and it just kind of hit me, and I just like, oh, I gotta do it, and I just figured out, because I knew I would forget, I had to like immediately research like the props of it as well, and like sketch it out. I sketch out or come up with a mock-up for everything, because even if I forget like like the complete visual of it, I'll still have something to reference to. So I would say that one. It's about the defeat and dismantling of white supremacy and its hold on like the society we live in, because it's like been created to like seep itself into different aspects of like the world we interact with, in like various methods. So I think that one, and then like the defeat of that, so like everyone can live like equal and equitable future is like something I'm really like passionate about in general, because I think everyone should have the opportunity and right to live an equal and equitable like life.
Do you mind if we dig into this particular photo? I have a couple questions about it. 'Cause I want to know the breakdown. I mean, that might take time, but I want to know, because we have a setting, right? And it looks like you're in the water.
Yes.
And you have someone that you're standing on. You actually probably not standing on that person, correct?
Yes.
And the person that's there, is that someone else, or did you?
They're all the same person. I shoot a lot of the things I implement. It's called compositing. So you take these two separate things and you kind of bring it together to be one scene. So that I think, and that can be seen like throughout a lot of the works here in like various methods. I tried to make it somewhat realistic looking compared to like the ones up front, which are more creative in nature. So yeah, all of those scenes are shot separately, and then it's brought into Photoshop, and I play with it until I get it how it, I think it should.
We have a question.
You quick try. You executed that well.
Right.
Yes.
Quick follow-up to the same portrait. Does the water represent the Atlantic slave trade?
Yes, that's not. I think something about water, it's like, for me, it's just like, it's very tranquil, so many things, it's a thing, bodies of water like divide and connect all of us, I think. So to set like this, like conceptually kind of like graphic, visceral thing on juxtaposing against like a tranquil thing, it's like the storm's ended, now here's what it is and how to like continue. But I like that.
And the water is calm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
May I ask one more question? Are we in Q&A?
Oh yeah, we're in
Okay,
Q&A.
we're
Questions
here.
are completely open for anyone that has questions to be asked.
Okay, so well, first I'll say congratulations. I'm so proud of you and so inspired by you. As a creator, I'm wondering, are there times where you are hesitant to publish a piece, or you have mixed emotions about sharing your work with the world? And if so, how do you navigate being vulnerable and embracing your vulnerability?
Sometimes I am like hesitant to do things, especially when it's like concepts I'm like kind of like close to in terms of like my experience with them in existence. Because like showing your work to people, it's like it's a very vulnerable thing. 'Cause it's like I've put like my time, blood, sweat, and sanity into these pieces, and then if everyone was just like, oh, these are garbage, I would be so sad. So there's always like that lingering like doubt in the back, like, oh, will people like this? Will people not like it? Like, I'm happy with it, but like, it's very reaffirming to have other people like your work as well, and also connect with it, or like have their own like interpretation of it that connects with what you're trying to convey in the first place. How I go about it, you kind of just like, I get like really anxious like all the time when it comes, especially when it comes to like new things, or like stepping out of my own comfort zone, because I can be extremely like introverted and like closed in on myself. But you just gotta like do it. I guess my mom's been really good about just making me do things even if I don't want to, because she knows that I'm like capable of doing things. I try to like continue that mindset when I'm not like around her, for her to have to do things.
Is that the price for your prints framed?
Yes, the frames are included with the prices listed.
I noticed the two pieces you have with the African American males or the men of color. What is your motivation for those pieces? They are very strong, they're very authentic, and it speaks to a range of issues, I believe. From self-love to self-compassion. It just has many genres attached. So I would like to know, as a woman, how did you capture that so strongly?
I think so. For this one over here, "Ode to Those Wrongfully Taken," I wanted to do the inspiration of that. It's Michelangelo's Pieta, and it's a statue of Jesus holding. No, not Jesus holding Jesus. Mary holding Jesus. After he's taken down from the crucifix and he's bleeding out, and it reminds me of because like I have not existed in a time where someone hasn't been like killed by a police officer on the news, and that displayed on the news. So it was kind of like an ode to that, because there's always, especially like a lot of the people, they're like young men and women, and like my age basically, or around my age. So it's always like that's like a weird, like that's a concern like in my head, like wow, sometimes it's like, oh, what's gonna happen? So that's an ode to that, and I wanted to represent that. The original idea was to have like a female person in there holding him, to be like a black mother holding like her dying child. But the way I like captured it, I didn't really like it. So I took the person out and made it just him in the picture, because also I don't think that I wanted it just to be about that person and like their humanity. Often in the media, when people are killed by the police or hate crimes, the victim, their humanity is like taken away and turned into like some other story, and it's really sad because people don't like think about, oh, that was someone's son, that was someone's brother, and I think when it comes to like racial stereotypes in the media, like black men specifically aren't given the opportunity to just be like gazed upon as themselves as people. They're always like a thug or like a brutish continuation of a minstrel character. So with like both pieces, the one out there as well, Song of Cage Bird, I think both create an opportunity to look at this young man as a person and just like gaze upon and observe, rather than a stereotype being like forced at you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, and congratulations. Thank you for hosting such a beautiful evening with such beautiful work. I'm really interested in what did you draw upon for the Cage Bird song, because that's very powerful.
I really like Maya Angelou's poems. I think she's a wonderful contributor to the English language and how it can be used. While I was creating it, sometimes I'll go back and forth between like references and inspirations while I'm doing it. Because like there will be moments where you kind of get lost in what you're doing, and then things are done too much. But I knew I wanted a piece that would visually complement the Sacred Heart painting, but not necessarily be a copy of that. That I think with the use, like the continuous use of like racial stereotypes in like the various forms of media we see. I wanted it to be like that person is himself like trapped within that like societal perception of him, regardless of being able to like say anything. So this like song is kind of like an outcry for that to be those prejudgments to be removed from the.
If I may, that's such a strong visual, and what really caught me, you used the color teal a lot. Any particular reason?
I think like teal and blues have a good representation with like calmness and serenity, but also they're like colors used often to associate with royalty in like formal portraiture. So I tried to have that amongst like the paintings, not the paintings, but like the pieces that I made, because it, in a way, it does like subvert from that. I get a lot of inspiration from this artist from Brooklyn called Kehinde Wiley, and he uses his works of, he'll take a person off the street. He captures a lot of like people of color in his works, and it's to subvert like the collective conscious of formal portraits and stuff, because when you're like taught about paintings and stuff, it's only like white aristocrats, and there weren't just white aristocrats in history. So I think a part of that is showing that we're also able to be in those spaces.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
So if I bought one of your pieces today, I won't see it like in 500 other places.
No, these are all all the ones on the walls are the originals, printed, sides on my laptop. So you would be the only one with these prints.
I have more of a comment. Can everybody can you hear me out there? Okay. Thank you. One of the things I think, there's just so much. First of all, because if you're familiar with Afrofuturism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get an Afrofuturism kind of vibe from here, again, what I see you doing though is like the way you're straddling timelines. Like you're going, again, the Botticelli piece is like from the 1400s, right? So you took that, extracted it, contemporized it, like made it contemporary now, right? And it's saying like, back then in the 1400s, 1500s, we were not in paintings. Black people were not in paintings unless we were some sort of servant way in the back somewhere, right? So for you to take it now and to put us in the forefront, like it's very powerful, right? But then that leads me to this thought where in the world today, like Supreme Court is making men and Supreme Court are making judgments on women's bodies, right? And particularly Black women's bodies always have been horrifically subjected to lots of inhumane things, right? You're putting yourself front and center, right? So what I see is you taking control of that narrative too, right? I am in control of this vessel. I'm in control of this body, right? You didn't have somebody take pictures of you, right? Right? That's empowering to me. They're like, this is what I want to convey, and I am the captain of this ship. And when I present it to you, I'm presenting to you fully thought out idea, you know? So a long way to my question is, when you have other people as subject, how do you treat that artwork? When you have other people as subject in your view, in your camera, how do you treat that?
I think I go about, before I start anything, like while I'm setting up or even before I set up, I think, how do I want this concept executed? And then I talk about like the concept I'm going for with my subject first, just to make sure we're all on the same level, and then I have like references and stuff so we can go off of that, and then we work with each other to get to like a final result.
Now, do you receive, like, are you commanding the whole situation, or are you received as a communication, like a barter between the two? Like, if that subject is like uncomfortable with it, but you pushed them to the point where it's like, trust me, this is the vision,
and they land on it and it's like, okay, I trust you, or do you more so like back off and be like, okay, you don't want to do that, and which compromises your vision?
I think when I use other people in my artworks, one of my first priorities is that they're always comfortable in what they're doing. Because because if I were to model for someone, I would want that photographer to take into consideration of myself as a person and what I was comfortable with. So I try to create like a safe space for everyone to like exist comfortably. When it comes to getting to the end, it's very much oh, this is what I'd like you to do, but also like feel free to like put your own like interpretation on it, and we'll see what we get at the end.
Very kind.
Alright, so I think we're gonna wrap up. Does anyone else have any like questions or anything? Alright. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I'd also like to specifically thank my mother for helping me put all of this together. And advertising everyone. She's definitely like my best manager, I like to say. I also like to thank my grandparents for being a support system as well. I wouldn't be where I am today without them and their input. Also, I'd like to thank Edreys and Aitina for like coming up here and stuff, and all of you for making your way out here.